Final Fantasy VII, a game so iconic, so deeply etched into the fibres of my gaming soul that I find myself drawn back to it once every few years like clockwork. It's more than just a favourite, it's a ritual. I've played it more times than I can count, and even recently I went as far as to claim the Platinum Trophy on my PlayStation 5. To the average gamer, I've done it all, acquired Knights of the Round, unlocked every limit break and toppled both the Ruby and Emerald weapons. So at this point, a question begins to creep in. What now? When you've uncovered every secret the game intended you to find, what secrets might remain that were never meant to be discovered? For many seasoned fans, this is where the obsession deepens. The goal shifts from simply playing the game to dissecting it, warping it, bending it until it reveals its unintended tricks and hidden oddities. This is why the speedrunning community around this game continues to grow, as there is an entire digital underworld of glitches, exploits and strange anomalies present that even some of the title's most hardcore fans may have never experienced. The deeper you dig, the more this game becomes something else entirely, revealing an adventure that contains a huge number of features that developers not only never planned, but perhaps never wanted you to see. So with that said, hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. These are the most awesome ways you can completely break Final Fantasy VII. Yeah! It's a genuinely exciting time to be an RPG fan. Not only can you still experience the legendary original Final Fantasy VII on modern hardware, but we're right in the middle of the epic remake trilogy, a true reimagining of a genre-defining classic. And if your heart belongs to more classical grand turn-based adventures, then Clair Obscur Expedition 33 has just landed to scratch that exact itch. What's better is that using my links you can get up to 47% off Remake and Rebirth, including a double pack, 40% off the newly released Expedition 33, and if you want to try some of today's exploits out for yourself, I can offer you 53% off the OG Final Fantasy VII too. I have discounts for you on thousands of games, including pretty much every Final Fantasy game ever made, so happy shopping and hope you enjoyed this video. When it comes to breaking Final Fantasy VII and performing naughty tricks that the devs never intended, the W item glitch is one of Final Fantasy VII's most well-known exploits. This exploit allows players to duplicate almost any usable item during battle, including rare and powerful consumables that would normally be difficult or time-consuming to obtain. To perform this glitch, you must first acquire the W item materia. This yellow command materia allows a character to use 2 items in a single turn, but fortunately for us, it is capable of a whole lot more than just that. Once you've got the W item materia equipped, you're ready to exploit the game's logic in a truly delightful way. To do this, you head into battle and use your first item, but when it's time to select the second item, you choose the one you want to duplicate. However, instead of confirming the target, you cancel the action. Magically, the quantity of that item will increase by 1. Do it again, and again, and again. Select, cancel, repeat, and hey presto, you can stockpile rare items endlessly, bending the rules of the game to your will. Beautifully broken, but beyond amazing. With this exploit, you can stock any item you already have in your inventory in minutes. It effectively removes any need to manage resources, as you can generate 99 copies of nearly anything without cost. Despite being present in the original 1997 PlayStation release, this glitch was never patched and still works in many re-releases, including the PC and modern console ports, so you can try it out no matter which version you have. It's a clear oversight in the game's code, but one that has become so iconic and widely accepted that it feels almost intentional. However, this is not the only strategy I have implemented in the past that is item related, so let's talk about another cool trick which will allow you to gain access to items that will make you OP in no time. Although Yuffie starts out as an optional character with a tendency to steal your materia, she becomes one of the most powerful utility characters in the game when equipped with the right weapon and used in conjunction with a few well-known exploits. The key in achieving this lies with her ultimate weapon, the Conformer, which you can obtain in the Sunken Gelnika. Unlike other weapons, the Conformer's damage output scales with a number of factors, including Yuffie's level, the enemy's level, and various buffs. Crucially, it is one of the only weapons in the game that ignores the normal damage penalty applied to the Morph command. Ordinarily, Morph reduces a character's physical damage significantly to ensure that enemies aren't defeated too quickly. This makes farming sources, the rare stat boosting item dropped when Morph defeats an enemy, slow and tedious. However, the Conformer allows Yuffie to deal full damage with Morph, meaning she can consistently one-shot the enemies that drop these valuable items. Certain enemies are walking treasure chests. Proud Clod type foes drop guard sources, while unknown type enemies can reward you with power, magic and luck sources. But why stop at just one? To truly maximise efficiency, you'll want to combine this with the legendary W-item duplication glitch we just discussed. After equipping Yuffie with the Conformer weapon and Morph materia for dealing massive damage while still triggering the Morph effect, you equip another party member with the W-item. Once in battle, you use Morph to take down the source dropping enemy, and just before the source is added to your inventory, initiate the W-item trick. Use one item, select the source as the second, then cancel and repeat. With this method, you can farm and duplicate stat boosts endlessly, turning your party into unstoppable demigods. Deliciously broken, just the way we like it. By repeating this method, you can create 99 of each source, allowing you to max out your character's stats to 255 across the board with minimal effort. Once again, this method doesn't require cheats or external tools. Everything happens within the game's own systems. With a bit of patience and setup, it transforms a slow post-game grind into a streamlined process. While clearly unintended, this technique is widely accepted by players aiming for full completion or high-level challenge runs. It turns Yuffie into a uniquely effective support unit for party optimization and is one of the best examples of turning overlooked mechanics into powerful tools. But there are other ways to pull off incredibly powerful attacks beyond increasing your stats. Tifa Lockhart is known for her strength, speed and limit break slot system, but with the right setup, she can become one of the most powerful single target attackers in Final Fantasy VII. The key lies in her Power Soul weapon and the way it interacts with certain status effects. You can find the Power Soul in Mount Nebel, not far from where you encounter the Materia Keeper. Unlike most weapons, its damage isn't based on Tifa's stats, level or materia setup. Instead, it scales dramatically based on how close she is to death. If her HP is in the yellow zone, aka critical condition, her attack damage is doubled. This effect stacks with the death sentence status, which places a countdown timer on the character. Normally, when the timer hits 0, the character is knocked out. However, while the timer is active, Power Cell's damage is doubled again, making it 4 times normal strength when combined with HP. To boost her stats even further, you can equip the Curse Ring. This accessory greatly increases all attributes, but also automatically applies death sentence at the start of the battle, allowing the stacking effect without needing an enemy to inflict it. To capitalise on this setup, equip Tifa with Deathblow materia, which guarantees a critical hit when it connects. Power Cell's base damage multiplier stacks with a critical hit bonus, allowing for massive damage output in a single strike. Adding counter-attack materia gives her further opportunities to strike back when hit, which fits the high-risk, high-reward strategy. In practical terms, this means that Tifa can deal tens of thousands of damage per hit using this setup, enough to defeat even some of the game's most powerful bosses with relative ease, provided you keep her alive long enough, of course. The strategy involves deliberately avoiding healing her, keeping her on the verge of defeat to maintain the bonus damage. It's a fragile but highly effective build, made possible by how Final Fantasy VII calculates modifiers on specific weapons. While likely not the developer's intended use, this technique has become a well-known exploit for those looking to optimize combat or explore the game's limits. Cait Sith is often considered one of Final Fantasy VII's least used characters, more of a comic relief mascot than a core party member. However, hidden within his second limit break, Slots is one of the most powerful and unexpected effects in the entire game. When activated, Slots randomly spins 3 reels featuring various symbols. Depending on the combination, you can receive stat buffs, call powerful allies, or trigger rare effects. Among these is the extremely rare Game Over result, which occurs when you land 3 Cait Sith face icons in a row. If this happens, all enemies on the battlefield are immediately and unconditionally defeated. Under normal circumstances, the game applies a failsafe, limiting the chance of this effect actually executing to 1 in 256, even if you land the correct icons. However, players have discovered a method to bypass this failsafe through precise timing and menu control. First, during the slot animation, hold down the square button to slow the reels right down. This gives you a clear view of each symbol as it passes. Next, as the second reel lands on a Cait Sith face, release the square and press circle with precision timing to lock it in. Now comes the real trickery, the third reel. You'll need to act fast. The moment it begins to spin, press circle again to lock in the final Cait Sith face before the game's internal RNG safety net activates. Time it perfectly and the failsafe won't block the effect. Congratulations! Instant game over for your enemies and a smug grin for you! Chaos has never been so calculated. When executed correctly, this sequence not only bypasses the randomness, but effectively turns Cait Sith into a one-button boss deleter. It's a technique that demands tight timing and practice, but is incredibly rewarding once mastered. While likely unintended, this glitch highlights the depth of play experimentation with the game's mechanics, turning a seemingly weak character into one of the most broken tools in the game's arsenal. The enemy skill material in Final Fantasy VII is one of the most versatile and abusable tools in the game. While casual players might associate it with oddities like Flamethrower or Matra Magic, those familiar with its true potential know it can rival and even outperform most traditional magic. Arguably the best to get is Big Guard, arguably the most overpowered support skill available. This single cast skill applies Barrier, half in physical damage, M Barrier, half in magical damage, and Haste, increasing turn frequency to the entire party at once. It delivers what would typically take 3 different spells or materia setups in a single efficient action, and all for a relatively modest MP cost. So here's how you get your hands on it. First, make your way to the sunny shores near Costa del Sol, where you'll find the elusive enemy known as the Beach Plug. In battle, use Manipulate to seize control of the Beach Plug and force it to cast Big Guard on your party. But don't forget, every character who wants to learn it must have enemy skill materia equipped, so make sure you're fully prepared. Do it right and you'll walk away with one of the most powerful defensive abilities in the game. Shiny, fast, and borderline invincible. Now that's what I call a beach day worth remembering. Once acquired, Big Guard can be used throughout most of the game to nullify large portions of enemy damage and keep your party attacking at a faster pace. But wait, there's more. To enhance this defensive setup even further, you can apply the Sadness status effect. This is normally inflicted using tranquilizer items and reduces all incoming damage by an additional 25%. Combined with Barrier and M Barrier, it allows characters to shrug off even the most powerful boss attacks. Chocobo racing in Final Fantasy VII was designed as a light-hearted side activity, a break from world saving where players could breed, train and race chocobos for prizes and progress towards obtaining a golden chocobo. But like much of the game, players found ways to push it far beyond its intended boundaries. The first exploit is relatively straightforward and works on most versions of the game. During any chocobo race, if you hold down all 4 shoulder buttons L1, L2, R1 and R2 along with square, your chocobo's stamina will regenerate, effectively preventing it from depleting during the race. This allows a bird to sprint continuously without slowing down, giving a major advantage over AI-controlled racers. Like everything we have covered, this method doesn't require any cheats or modifications. It's simply an unintended interaction between the input system and the stamina mechanics, and it can be performed consistently by holding the buttons throughout the race. The game was never designed to reward players for mashing or holding a bizarre combination of buttons during such a race, yet here we are, with a mechanic that allows you to effortlessly outpace the competition by exploiting how the game interprets simultaneous inputs. Much like the W item, this stamina exploit reveals just how fragile the seams of even the most iconic games can be, and how satisfying it is to pull these seams apart. It's this very fragility in Final Fantasy VII's design that has given rise to an entire community of speedrunners. Players who dedicate themselves to tearing the game apart piece by piece in search of every possible shortcut. Through relentless trial and error, painstaking testing, and an almost obsessive level of perseverance, they've unearthed a treasure trove of skips, glitches, and sequence breaks that allow for astonishingly fast playthroughs. What began as a way to simply beat the game quickly has evolved into a deep, technical pursuit, where understanding the game's internal logic, or lack thereof, is just as important as fast reflexes. These discoveries aren't just luck, they're the result of years of collective effort, driven by the thrill of outsmarting a system that was never meant to be bent so far. So let's cover some of them. For the millions who have played Final Fantasy VII, you'll be more than aware that the early to mid-game follows a fairly linear narrative structure, gradually revealing Cloud's backstory and guiding players through set-piece events. However, through a combination of glitches and creative routing, several key story sequences can be bypassed entirely, especially in speedruns and sequence breaking playthroughs. This brings us on to talking about guard skip, or Zuna skip. But Zuna skip is an exploit that allows players to enter wall market early, bypassing key dialogue and events. The skip is executed near Sector 7, where Shinra guards are meant to block your path. However, there is a way around them. By carefully aligning Cloud against a very specific piece of wall geometry near a guard and using subtle alternating movement inputs, often with the R1 button held to walk slowly, you can gradually clip past the invisible event trigger that would normally launch the next cutscene. It's a perfect example of how players can bend the game's world to their will, turning what looks like an impassable checkpoint into a mere suggestion. We then have the Zolom skip, which is pretty self-explanatory regarding its purpose. In the marshland near the Mithril mine, the fearsome Midgar Zolom was purposely placed to block progress, forcing players to engage with the game's Chocobo capturing and breeding system before moving on. But, as with so many barriers in Final Fantasy VII, determined players have found a way around it. No Chocobo required. The trick lies in manipulating the Zolom's behaviour. Its AI is surprisingly predictable, but luring it towards the left side of the marsh and then quickly circling around the right, players can slip past without even triggering a battle. But what makes this skip truly remarkable is not just its cleverness, it's the years of community experimentation and testing that went into refining it. But here is where things get even more interesting. Not only can you bypass the Midgar Zolom in the marsh, but skilled players have also discovered ways to clip through the mountains themselves, allowing us to skip the Mithril mine and even further areas long before you're supposed to. But more on that shortly. If skipping the Zolom and Mithril mines wasn't enough for you, how about Cloud's entire lengthy Nibelheim flashback that takes place in Calm? The Calm skip is one of the most significant time-saving exploits in Final Fantasy VII, allowing players to completely bypass Cloud's flashback. To pull it off, you'll first need to acquire a Chocobo from a nearby farm. Then, by navigating to a specific patch of terrain near Calm, you can exploit a clipping glitch that lets you slip past the invisible trigger zone responsible for launching the flashback. If done correctly, you can bypass the entire story sequence and proceed straight to the Junon area, drastically cutting down early game playtime. Like many of the game's most impressive skips, this trick is the product of extensive testing and collaboration with the speedrunning community, another example of players outmaneuvering the game's intended structure with sheer ingenuity. Together, these skips demonstrate just how flexible and breakable Final Fantasy VII structure can be. They don't require external tools or cheats, just precise movements and an understanding of how the game's event triggers work. While they certainly weren't part of the intended experience, they've become iconic techniques in the community for those interested in fast, unconventional playthroughs. To understand how much of this is possible, we can look to an even crazier skip. The Disc 1 skip, which requires a technique referred to as cloud surfing, stands as one of the most impressive and game-breaking glitches in Final Fantasy VII, and a true hallmark of RPG sequence breaking. This exploit allows players to reach late-game areas, including the eerie Forgotten City, long before the story is ready to take them there. The setup relies on exploiting flawed collision detection on the world map, particularly around the Mithril mine and its surrounding terrain. With a Chocobo in tow from a nearby farm, players can navigate to a specific glitched boundary where the terrain doesn't quite line up as it should. By dismounting it at just the right point, Cloud is launched onto inaccessible terrain, be it mountaintops, shallow water, or even unwalkable zones. From here, the world opens up in a way that developers never intended, allowing you to march across oceans and mountains straight into the Forgotten City. However, if you want a more detailed explanation of how this works, I highly recommend the deep dive you can find of this strategy uploaded by the channel Abisoft. What's really cool is if you are able to get to the Forgotten Capital this way, what you can make happen next is both fascinating and deeply strange. The game still triggers the infamous scene in which Aerith dies, but because the proper story flags haven't been set, she doesn't leave the party. Instead, she remains playable, able to fight, equip materia, and gain experience. It's a surreal and haunting disconnect between the story and gameplay, effectively ripping the narrative thread in two. So for everyone who ever told you it's impossible to save Aerith in a playthrough, well, those people lied. Executing this skip requires careful positioning, a solid understanding of the map's collision oddities, and plenty of patience. but it works on the original release and reportedly some ports too. Still, for those seeking to break the game wide open, the Disc 1 skip remains one of the most epic yet unsettling exploits in RPG history. For those who don't skip most of Disc 1, Cosmo Canyon is designed to be a required stop on your journey. As you approach the area with the buggy vehicle, a scripted breakdown is supposed to occur, forcing the party to stop and trigger Red 13's backstory sequence. However, with precise manipulation, it's possible to completely bypass the scripted event at the canyon, exactly where the buggy normally breaks down to force a story detour. By carefully controlling your approach vector, avoiding diagonal movement and sticking to straight deliberate inputs, you can align the buggy just outside the invisible event trigger. In some cases, exiting and re-entering the buggy helps subtly adjust Cloud's position to avoid accidentally stepping into the activation zone. When executed correctly, you'll be able to drive straight past the canyon entrance without triggering the breakdown, allowing you to continue towards Nibelheim uninterrupted. This skip not only fast-tracks progression but also sidesteps a major character moment. Another example of how dedicated players have dissected the game's structure to forge alternate paths through its iconic narrative. The paralysis dodge glitch in Final Fantasy VII is a subtle but powerful movement exploit used primarily in speedruns and sequence breaks. It takes advantage of the way the game handles player input and movement during certain scripted events, particularly when Cloud is supposed to be frozen in place, i.e. paralysed, while a scene loads or a cutscene trigger is about to activate. Normally, when you approach certain story locations on the overworld or field map, the game locks Cloud's movement, paralysing him for a few frames as it begins transitioning into a scripted sequence. However, under very specific conditions like approaching from a precise angle, avoiding diagonal movements or slightly misaligning your position, you can interrupt or avoid this movement lock entirely. This allows you to dodge the trigger zone, slipping past an event that was supposed to halt your progress or launch a cutscene. It's this technique that helps make many of the skips we've seen possible. Late in Final Fantasy VII, as the party traverses the snowfields en route to Guy's Cliff, players are required to visit a small structure known as the Shell Hut. The Shell Hut skip is a precise and well-documented exploit that allows players to bypass another key story event in the game, the flashback that normally occurs just before climbing Guy's Cliff. To perform this skip, players must execute a carefully controlled movement sequence across the snowy terrain outside the Shell Hut. This involves avoiding the diagonal inputs, sticking tightly to specific terrain edges, and approaching the cliff from an angle that sidesteps the invisible story trigger. When done correctly, Cloud and the party are able to walk right past the Shell Hut without triggering the narrative event, continuing toward the cliff uninterrupted. Though it skips important backstory, the game continues normally, making this a popular time saver in speedruns and sequence break strategies. The save crystal glitch is another quirk buried deep in the game's late stages. Upon reaching the northern cave, players receive a one-time use item called the save crystal, which allows them to place a save point anywhere within the dungeon. While this is meant as a convenience for preparing against the final boss, it can become a liability. Placing the save crystal in certain unstable rooms, particularly areas with overlapping event triggers or odd loading behaviours, can cause a range of serious issues. These include crashes, soft locks, enemy spawn bugs, and even complete audio loss. This glitch poses a major threat to long-form playthroughs, where a poorly placed save crystal can render a save file unwinnable. Essentially, it's completely broken. Together, these glitches, whether minor skips or major game-breaking exploits, demonstrate just how deeply Final Fantasy VII can be deconstructed with technical knowledge and precision. These unintended features don't just break the game, they expand it. They reveal what's under the surface, they invite experimentation and reward curiosity. If you want to try some of these glitches out for yourself, don't forget many can be experienced in the Steam version of the game, which I have a 53% discount on for you down below. You can also get up to 47% off of the remake and rebirth games, including the double pack, 40% off of the newly released Expedition 33, and I have discounts for you on thousands of other titles, including pretty much every Final Fantasy game ever made. So happy shopping and cheerio!